Astronomy Cast, episode 275 from Monday, October 8th, 2012. Isaac Newton. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, our weekly facts-based journey through the cosmos, where we help you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. My name is Fraser Kane. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and with me is Dr. Pamela Gay, a professor at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Hey, Pamela, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? And happy Canadian Thanksgiving to you.
You have a Canadian husband, and
I
so I'm
do.
sure you are made aware every year that this is the proper and true Thanksgiving, and not the other one. So it's good. I hope you had turkey last night or tonight.
I sadly was on a plane last night,
Oh, right.
so I had a sad ravioli.
Um, so I don't know if we had anything. We didn't think of anything to announce, so I don't think we will. Actually, you know what we should announce is just to remind people that we record every episode of Astronomy Cast now as a live Google Plus Hangout, and if you want to join us and watch us record live and ask your questions, we are. You can circle the Astronomy Cast page on Google Plus, and then you'll get a notification when we're going to record. But normally record Mondays at noon Pacific time, 3 Eastern. Do the math for all the other time zones. Cool. All right. Well, you ready to go?
I'm hoping you always find something I'm not
I
ready
know.
for.
Just you wait. Yeah. All right. Well, let's go. So Isaac Newton has been called the greatest and most influential scientist who ever lived, and that sounds about right. He unlocked our modern understanding of gravity and the laws of motion, dabbled in optics, philosophy, even alchemy, and he's also known to have a bit of a difficult personality. So let's find out everything we can about Isaac Newton. All right. So if you could pick one discovery that Isaac Newton was most famous for, gravity.
I think it's probably a tie between gravity and calculus, because more people have to learn calculus than remember gravity.
That's true. Um, so then who was this guy, and where did he sort of come from?
Well, so the odd thing is that while he's most remembered as a scientist, he was a Brit who was eccentric, who was difficult to work with, who's generally believed to have Asperger's, and who wrote far more about um, Christian Hermetics and occult and alchemy than he did about science. So it's just fascinating that a lot of what he did was based on trying to use science to understand religion and use logic to translate the Bible. He was fluent in Hebrew, but it's his writing related to science that survives to the modern day.
I always think of him as a Sheldon Cooper. I gotta say, you
I,
know.
I, I think that that's fairly accurate, but had Sheldon listened to his mother concerning religion. Although it's to say Newton didn't believe in the Holy Trinity. He thought that worshiping Jesus was idolatry. So while he was a Christian Hermetic, he was also a heretic. And so he was just like a totally confusing dude.
Yeah, and he did some pretty weird experiments. I hope we'll get to the one where he jammed a knitting needle in his eye to see how optics worked. But let's go back then. So where did he come from? Where did he grow up and get his initial education?
So he was born prematurely on Christmas Day in the old calendar, and his father died 3 months later. He was born in Worthop by Collistworth in Lincolnshire, England, where they have
That's a
long and
good
difficult names.
that's a good British name for a town.
It is, it is. So according to his mother, you could basically stick the poor guy in a mug upon his birth. He was quite small. And his father died a few months after he was born, and his mother remarried and then left poor young Newton to be raised by his grandmother. And according to all accounts, Newton never fully got on with his stepfather or particularly got on with his mother after that. So he had a difficult childhood. He did go to school, went to college, but then had to drop out of college when his mother's second husband passed away, and she said he needed to come back and be a farmer. Except as one might imagine, academics don't make the best farmers under many situations, especially not the physically science-bent ones. And eventually the university convinced his mother to let him go back to school. So he just had a very difficult beginning to his life, but he was able to complete his education. He went on to get a position at Cambridge that allowed him to both work for the university and study. And
Now, what time frame are we looking at here? I'm just trying to get some context here. I mean, he was sort of in the what, the 1700s?
he was actually, well, he was in the 17th century. He was born in 1642. He died at the beginning of the 1700s. So his childhood was all during the 1600s. He actually was overlapping with the bubonic plague, which one interesting thing to think about is the universities shut down due to the plague at various times, and it was while he was sent home to avoid dying of the plague, as one hopes to do, that he was able to accomplish a lot of his writing.
Right. Okay, and so he ended up at Cambridge, which was like the perfect place for somebody interested in these kinds of topics.
Yes, so he was able to finish his education while he was at Cambridge, and this was back in the days before you got a specific degree in physics, you got a specific degree in mathematics. It was pretty much a university degree, and while he was in university, he studied Descartes and Copernicus and all the great thinkers. And it was while he was working on all of his studies that he started to figure out advanced mathematical theories. In 1665, he developed the binomial theorem. So his initial work was, let's think about all of the great philosophers, let's think about all of the great scientists, and let's work on building mathematical treaties. And so he started with the binomial theorem and has been torturing math students ever since.
Yeah, I think I've been tortured by that one. Right. Okay. So pure math. So then how, But I mean, he's famous for so many different things. So
Right.
how did his education take him further into that?
Well, so the thing with being an academic back then was it wasn't like today where you said, I want a grant to go do foo, I want a grant to go do foo. It was more a matter of you you thought, you worked, you exchanged letters. And so for him, he developed the binomial theory about the time that he was done with that, and he had graduated. The university temporarily closed due to the Great Plague, bubonic plague. This was its second massive sweep through England, and when he went home, it was while he was home that he started working on developing calculus and working in optics and thinking about the law of gravitation. So between 1665 and 1667, he was working from his house, something that I know you and I both enjoy getting to do.
Yeah.
But in those pre-internet days, that meant you were kind of trapped and left on your own with your thoughts. But Newton was such that he died a virgin according to all accounts. He never had a relationship with a woman. While he had some good friends who were men that he exchanged letters with, for the most part he was a very solitary individual. So these years were highly productive for him. And when he returned to Cambridge as a fellow of Trinity University, it was a chance for him to continue working on, although one of the things that he had to deal with was the fellows at that time were required to become ordained priests, and so Newton had the fun of trying to avoid becoming a priest who, as I said, he was a heretic, and it's kind of hard to commit yourself to becoming a priest when you recognize you don't believe that Jesus Christ is part of the Trinity, and while you're good with God, you're not good with the modern views of the church. So he had an interesting time at that point, and eventually managed to avoid becoming a priest by becoming, well, the Lucasian chair, which is the chair that's now held by Stephen Hawking. So he sort of started a grand tradition at that point.
Now, do you need to eject a dog there?
Yeah, I was hoping to keep her quiet.
Sorry, Preston.
The problem I run into is my office door doesn't thoroughly close, and so the dog can just kind of bring herself in, although normally she doesn't.
Um, all right.
Sorry,
Okay.
Preston. So I answered that I ended with he became the Lucasian chair.
Right, which was Stephen Hawking's position.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a bit about the uh, sort of the specific sciences that he worked on. So why don't
Okay.
we kind of go there next? Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right, ready? Here we go.
Yep.
Okay, so I mean, he had sort of quite an interesting life, as you said. You know, very reminiscent of sort of personality-wise of Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory, which I think is a great model.
Sheldon
Uh,
had a girlfriend. Newton did not.
right. Um, that's debatable. So I think that, so what are sort of but during this time, very productive, couple of decades,
Yeah.
massive improvements in all kinds of sciences and math. So I think we should really break down these different topics of study that he went through and sort of put them in some kind of order and really take a look at all the things that he so what was you said he worked on binomial theory. What were some of the other really big and important groundbreaking areas of study that he worked on, and
Well,
what was the process?
the advancement of calculus, infinitesimal calculus. This is where you take the sum of all the littlest pieces and add them up to find the area under a curve, basically. He developed that in order to be able to advance his physics. And one of the interesting problems faced by people trying to put all of the pieces together is Newton didn't want to share or publish anything he didn't feel was absolutely perfect, because he greatly feared being scorned or ridiculed. So while he developed calculus most likely in the late 1660s, he didn't bother to get around to publishing it until the late 1680s. And this opened the door for Leibniz to be in a position to co-discover calculus and put his theories forward and try and claim that he was the developer of it. Luckily, the book Principia, which is much of Isaac Newton's theories on physics, clearly required him to have developed calculus, and he had other earlier books. One, a manuscript on the motion of bodies in orbit, that clearly also required some form of calculus to have been present as well in order for him to have come to the conclusions he came to. So it's now generally accepted that Newton developed it first, but what's interesting is we use Leibniz's notation for it because it's considered to just be the easier way to notate calculus.
And this just comes back to this constant situation with the early scientists where, in order to do the kind of work that they wanted to do, they would have to invent the various pieces of the puzzle to be able to do it. And so you have the situation where in order to be able to do better math for gravity, he had to invent possibly the most important mathematic invention in the last 1,000 years, as a tool, in the same way that
Right.
Galileo had to invent a new way of a thermometer, or, you know what I mean? That there was this, I don't know, there was almost like an expectation that if you were going to push the boundaries, not only were you going to have to push the boundaries in your science, but you were going to have to come up with the instruments and the technology and the methods. And, I could imagine him going, well, I need a computer, so it's time to sit down and, invent, silicon conductors, because that's what I got to do to be able to, I don't know, compute how I can turn lead into gold,
Yeah, it wasn't quite like that, but one of the, I think, most reaching things that Isaac Newton did in a certain way, in a certain framework, is he was such a perfectionist in what he did that when he finally did get around to sharing his different theories, when he finally got around to publishing his results, he did it in such a thorough manner and with such a concise language that the style with which he wrote Principia is considered to be the best possible style that a scientist can use. So, well, yes, he defined the calculus that everything we do, unfortunately, relies on, or fortunately, depending on how you feel about having to sit down and do mathematics. While he is one of the early people to have sorted out many different things with optics, while he sorted out why Kepler's equations work, and we'll describe all of these in a moment, the way that he described these things It's not just used in physical sciences. It's not just used in mathematics. It's used across all of academia as a way to discuss scientific concepts. So he defined the language with which we use as professional scientists to communicate to one another.
Wow, that's pretty deep. Okay, so we've got calculus. What else?
So binomial theory, calculus, those were really the big things for him when it comes to mathematics. He did lots of other things, but those are the big things that people walk away with. Optics is probably next. Um, he was the first person to really put together the pieces that white light, the light that comes out of incandescent light bulbs, the light that comes from the sun, that when you focus it onto a wall you get a nice white circle, although we typically talk about the sun as being yellow, but that's a complicated discussion.
Yeah.
White light, he realized, is actually just the combination, the additive combination of a variety of different colors. And by playing with prisms and lenses, he realized that you can use a prism to diffuse all those different colors. And he realized that lenses, in their own way, use the same principles as that prism. And because of that, any telescope that's ever made that uses lenses is always going to be dividing all of that white light out into all of its individual colors. This is something called chromatic aberration. And in order to prove that he was right, he developed a new type of telescope that we call the Newtonian telescope that uses a reflecting mirror. And for him, the idea wasn't so much to build the better telescope, but to show that lenses refract light into all of its different colors, whereas mirrors simply reflect the beams. For him, this was, he thought of, well, what we now call photons as corpuscles, so it was the corpuscular theory. Today, we recognize that light is both particles and waves, but he was one of the early people saying it's particles, and here's how you treat it mathematically as particles. And here's how mirrors don't care what color those particles are. So that was kind of a creepy, awesome modern thing.
And so, what's the sort of darning needle in his eyeball story?
So I have to admit that I'm completely grossed out by eyeballs. So any reference I had of that in my head had been blocked out until you brought it back up at the beginning of this show.
Oh, really? Okay, all right. Well, so if I recall, then he wanted to see how the eyeball distorted light, how it acts as a lens, and so he took a knitting needle and he kind of jammed it. Is it gonna squick you out?
Yes.
Okay. Knitting needle.
Google it.
Squeezed his eyeball around a bit and took a look at how it affected the light and how it changed his vision and
Yuck. Yuck.
Nearly blinded himself. So go ahead, Google the story.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of thing that would occur to him. He's just like, well, I got to figure this out, and I am the closest human around.
Yuck.
So let's perform the experiment. Yeah.
Yuck.
Anyway, yeah. Okay, all right.
Yeah, not so big on eyeballs.
I've learned something new about you.
Yeah. I can't even watch people put contacts in. I am totally squeed out by eyeballs.
No, I've never put a contact lens in. I can't even imagine doing it. But okay, well let's move on then, so we can move past optics. So so again, figured out like prisms, rainbows, light breaking up, combining again. Okay, also very important.
So in 1675, he published his hypothesis on light, putting forward his ideas in written form, and talked about the idea of the ether being something that transmitted it. Luckily, it turns out light doesn't need any such thing. It's quite happy to go through vacuum. What's interesting is he worked with so many other scientists over the year. He worked with Hooke, with Henry Moore, and he started thinking about light in terms of alchemy, and at one point he actually replaced the ether in his ideas with occult forces, and so occasionally he wandered away from mathematical reality and tried to use science to prove occult ideas, which is kind of something that most people don't learn
That's
about.
hilarious. I wonder how much. But I guess the question is like back in that time when you think about their line of thinking was, was the occult just the occult was absolutely true, alchemy was true, and so it was perfectly reasonable to use your logic and your reason and your experiments to try and understand these, but that the I don't know, that the occult or the alchemy, yeah, it was all
But
just the same. You know what I mean?
he
And that
he actually took it further than others. This is why he was so afraid of being accused of being a heretic, and he never talked to people about his beliefs. He did have a lot of writing that went unpublished, um, and so this wasn't mainstream. John Maynard Keynes actually wrote that Newton was the first of the Age of Reason, um, but the last of the magicians. And so here you have this man of science, but he wasn't actually a man of science. He, in his head, it was the occult, it was religion, it was alchemy, and he was simply trying to prove it with reason as the Age of Reason was getting started.
hmm.
This wasn't mainstream. He was the guy on the radio in the middle of the night, except he had the math to back up what he said.
But I wonder if you like putting it into the context of the time, like were
No,
the
he was
things that
still a crazy dude.
he was still crazy. Okay, so it's not like the things that he was talking about and the topics that he wanted to go into were well accepted and regarded, and a lot of people shared his beliefs.
No,
He put people off, and they were wondering why that's all he wanted to talk about, and they had
it's
all
more
already moved on, right?
it's more a matter of he did all of this work, all of this writing. He even traveled around trying to find meaning in the architecture of buildings in the old world, going down to Greece and Rome, and studying the Tomb of Solomon. And this, for the most part, was all kept secret because he knew it wasn't normal. It's sort of like he worked so hard to avoid becoming a priest because he knew his ideas weren't normal. So he's the crazy person who's self-aware that he's crazy, and didn't publish most of his work. It was kept in letters and documents that came out after his death. For the most part, he refrained in what he published to completed ideas. So this is where his Principia of Physics, his optics, on optics, were complete ideas that he published as a whole, but he could never reach completion on his occult ideas, so those didn't get released on the public, luckily. It might have had devastating effects on his career, and he knew that.
So we're at 24 minutes or so, and we haven't even gotten to gravity, and there's lots of other stuff that he did. So do you want to make this two shows?
Sure.
Yeah? Because I mean, we'd probably go another couple of minutes, and then we can wrap it up, and then pick up all of the gravity and stuff and death and
Well, his death was kind of boring. He just lived to be an old guy.
yeah,
We can probably, I mean, we lost a minute or two to the dog leaving the
yes,
room.
no, I know, but we're still, we'll be in this sort of 26, 28 minute range within a couple of minutes. So I mean, we've got all of gravity. We
Yeah,
can
but
go to
gravity's
35. Sure. Yeah.
gravity can be done briefly.
Okay. Well, then sure, that's fine.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Well, let's keep rolling then.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got all his work into the optics and stuff, but I guess we're missing sort of the next logical step here is the thing we talked about right at the beginning, which is his incredible work on gravity. So,
So
what was the concept of gravity before Newton had a think about it?
it wasn't so much that it existed. We had Kepler's laws, but the idea of forces didn't exist. That came about from Newton's work, and so starting in 1679, he started thinking about celestial mechanics. He started trying to understand what caused Kepler's laws, and while he was working on all of this, the ideas started to build. He started putting together his theories of motion, equations of motion, kinematic equations as we refer to them today, depending on what book you pick up. and it all started to come together as a whole. And this is where his book Principia came together, which was published in 1687. So he finally pulled all the pieces together in this one. It's still considered to be perhaps the best written science book of all time. He basically sat down and put all the pieces together into a whole that we now call Physics 1 in university, where you start with, well, here are the equations of motion. Okay, where do the equations of motion come from? Well, you have forces acting. Well, what's the force that's acting on the moon, on objects that are falling? Well, that's gravity. And it's this beautiful, crystal clear notion once you add force, and once you're willing to admit that, well, maybe there's this invisible force pulling objects together, and well, since things fall, it was easy to follow this through to its end. And it's just this beautiful, clean-cut theory that people angst over far too much.
Now, what about this whole concept of the apple falling?
See, that one's argued about whether or not it's apocryphal or just an analogy he told. So most people think it probably never happened, and it was just a convenient way to explain things.
But the idea is, an apple. He saw an apple falling, and then
So the story goes that he saw an apple falling, he looked up, saw the moon, realized that the moon is falling as well, but the way it's falling is it's constantly missing the Earth and just curving around our planet. And this is something that we've talked about in our own astronomy cast on gravity.
Right. It's this concept that if you had a cannon and you shot it sideways fast enough, it would eventually just go into orbit around the Earth, that it would just keep falling further and further from where it was shot until it was, if you shot it fast enough, it would go into orbit. And it still is falling, but it's also falling at the same amount of speed, I guess, that it's, moving around the Earth as well. And so it just keeps going into orbit. But that's a stunning recognition to kind of see the apple fall and kind of go, the apple and the moon, that's the same thing. And that's, whether you say it's apocryphal, that's the way he described it in I think it's the Principia. Anyway, but that's the way he described it, right? Was to say that they're all just falling, that it's all forces and it's all the same thing.
And he did this when he was in his 40s. So he accomplished mathematics, geometry, binomial theorem. He did binomial theorem while still in university, gravity, all before his 40s, and he still went on to have even more of a diverse career. He went on to head up the Royal Mint, where he was responsible for investigating a large number of forged coins and doing all of the detailed investigations. And he was someone who just couldn't leave a mystery uninvestigated, whether that mystery be what is it that causes a prism to break up light, to what is it that how was it that all of these coins were forged. He estimated at one point that 20% of the coins that were swapped out in the Great Recoinage of 1696 were actually counterfeit coins, and counterfeiting was high treason. So he had a lot of investigating to do that led to people being drawn and quartered. So his heritage also includes causing people to be killed.
Right. So we've got gravity, we've got his work on the Royal Mint, we've got his chair, at Cambridge, right?
Yeah.
Cambridge. Yeah. And isn't this the chair that Stephen Hawking holds now? Yeah. Yeah, you were mentioning that. Yeah, right. So it's, a long history after his. So okay, so he does work in gravity, he's working at the Mint. Anything left?
Well, he lived into his 80s, and what's interesting is he lived this long and fruitful life where he was, once he reached adulthood, he lived that academic's life where you stay in the fellows' halls in the university and you exchange letters with others, and he moved in amazing circles, knowing Locke and Voltaire, and interestingly enough, he had a niece who was stunningly beautiful and is one of the ones who ended up with all of his papers later, and there's letters exchanged where he showed that he wasn't always a cold-hearted Aspergery scientist, but he actually wrote of his love to her in friendly uncle love, nothing skeezy or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's because of this relationship with his niece that so many of his papers were able to be well carried into the future.
And so he said he lived in his 80s. Where did he die?
He died in England. He died while still working at the university.
And I'm trying to think. Wasn't his grave part of the part of that awful Dan Brown book?
Yeah, that's true, but I don't know if any of that was at
Worth
all
reading.
portrayed. And yeah, true.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, what a great story, and what a great man, and what a weird man. So
Yeah, exactly. You have to keep
so
in context the weirdness, which does
weirdness.
show.
Yeah.
Occasionally, you do have to listen to the crazy crackpot people who are making their own shit up, because if they use math, they could be right. But if they don't use math, just ignore them.
Right. I sort of think about it like our forum, like
Yeah.
he's the kind of person who we would give him 30 days on our forum and then we would not let him propose his ideas anymore,
So
except
so
that he
what
turned out to
Fraser's
be turned
talking
out to be
about.
right.
Yeah. So what Fraser's talking about is the Bad Astronomy Universe Today forums that are hosted on cosmoquest.org, and there's a part of the forum where people can present their own alternative theories of reality. And they have 30 days to be interrogated by the community. And if they can match all of the questions, well, then they're allowed to continue talking about their theory and hopefully moving it forward and changing science. So far, no one's
Yeah,
succeeded.
hasn't happened yet. No.
No.
And then that's it. 30 days and then the conversation is closed and they don't get to talk about it again. So, cool. Well, thank you very much, Pamela. And I think we were hoping to do this as a two-parter. Next week we're going to talk about the XMM Newton telescope, which was
Yes.
based on his name. So, that's the way we roll. So, we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pamela.
But don't go anywhere. We're just pausing our recordings.
Stop.
Yes.
Save.
Yes.
Export. Done. We're safe. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Well, so once again, if anybody wants to ask us any questions as it relates to Newton or space and astronomy in general, or whatever you want, we're glad to take them. You can comment on the event page if you're watching it there. You can comment on the Google Plus if you're watching it in shared or reshared somewhere. You can post a question in on YouTube, or if you want to use Twitter, you can use the hashtag AstronomyCast. We'll stick around and answer some questions, and if we don't get any questions, we will we'll shut this hangout down.
And I only have 20 minutes today because we're running behind, and
Yeah.
I have a 3:15.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of time either, so I've got a 3:15. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've got a 3:30 by your time in the future. Okay, so we got a question here for Pamela regarding light speed limit.
It is a law unless you're a quantum particle tunneling.
Are you reading the question?
No, I
Oh, okay, all
simply,
right.
that is the answer to everything about light speed.
Okay, so I guess the question is, how is it possible that the universe during inflation was expanding faster than the speed of light when nothing is able to move faster than the speed of light?
Expansion is different from moving. So the way to think about it is you're inserting stuff in, and so these two particles aren't moving. It's the amount of space between them is getting greater. So they haven't moved. They're still attached to the coordinate system of the universe at the same place, but those two places now have more stuff between them.
Yeah, and this is a question, you got to sort of say with respect to what, right? That if you've got these two
Yeah.
particles and they're already a trillion light years apart, and then you expand them out, they're going to be moving faster than the speed of light from each other, but there
They're
is no
going to be
light
appearing to move. They
appearing.
aren't
Yeah,
actually moving.
right, because space itself is the thing that's doing the expansion. So
Yeah.
it's totally
They're going to
legit.
be carried apart from one another at greater than the speed of light.
And there's this implication, right, where in the far, far future, as the expansion of the universe is continuing to accelerate, where galaxies are going to start to disappear off this horizon because they're now moving away from us faster than the speed of light, and so the light from them will never reach us.
Yeah.
But they're not actually moving in space faster than the speed of light. It's just that space itself is carrying them away faster than the speed of light
And the way to
from our
think
perspective, but not
right.
necessarily from a galaxy that's closer to them. So
So the way to think of this is the Pamela maximum speed is probably about 5 miles per hour, maybe 6 miles per hour if I practice for a while. And I regularly go far faster than my speed limit because I'm getting carried around by a car, an airplane, the
the
planet Earth is
rotation of
carrying
the
me
planet and
around.
the rotation around the
Yeah.
galaxy and the expansion of the universe. Yeah, so it's
So
all
no,
with respect to what.
right.
So Ilya Sarah asks, so do particles behind a black hole event horizon move faster than light?
No, well, we have no way.
Oh.
The physics doesn't exist in a way we can communicate inside the event horizon. Basic answer is once you go within the event horizon, physics shouldn't change, except for we have no way about talking about the densities of materials as they get down into the singularity.
Right. But again, it's not that the laws of physics break down. It
Right.
is that our understanding of the laws of physics are incomplete.
The math that we use to describe it breaks, and
Something
that's a
in there is
description
happening.
error.
Yeah, something in there is happening. We just can't understand it. Don't understand it yet. So,
Yeah. We need another Newton who's hopefully a little bit more socially well adjusted.
or less, you know, less into the occult, more time for science. Sheldon Cooper would be perfect. Right. So, I mean, the situation you get is, is a black hole. We don't. There's a bunch of things we don't know about a black hole, right?
Yeah.
Is a black hole a singularity? Or sorry, is it a sort of discrete size? Like if you went into a supermassive black hole and could somehow withstand the forces, could you touch the black hole surface? Or is it that the black hole is continuing to collapse infinitely at an infinite speed, and and it's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and you just can't see it because there's nothing stopping its collapse at this point.
That we know of. The
Don't
problem
know.
is we don't know how to explain the particles that are inside of the black hole. We know that neutrons collapse, but we don't know what things collapse into when the pressures are too high for a neutron to stay a neutron.
Do you think we could do a show on calculus?
Do you love me?
Well,
We could. I just don't know how you do an audio show on
I know.
calculus.
I know, but we did an audio show on astrophotography, so it's a puzzler. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, I think that may be one of those topics that you don't do without a whiteboard.
Well, right, but I guess, but to get at the core of it, I mean, as you hinted at it, right, which is that calculus is about you have a curve and you measure the distance under the curve, and it's a way to add up all of the distances under the curve in a way that is useful. And so I think there are some analogies there. Anyway, stick it in your brain and rattle it around, because I guess the thing is, like, calculus is like this wall, this impenetrable wall for a lot of people. And they
Right, but
think
the
that
problem is teaching calculus without teaching physics is somewhat of a pointless endeavor that many math teachers tried to do. But to truly understand calculus in many ways, you need to understand the physics, and this is where it starts to become a cart and horse issue of
Mhm.
you need to understand, well, why does all of this stuff matter? How does it all pull together? And you need to be drawing three-dimensional objects, and it's, yeah,
I'm just, I think you're up for the task. And I
I
think
think you're
the
crazy.
fans watching will agree with me. And it might be a train wreck of a show, but I can ask you the right questions and try to parrot your intelligent things in a sort of way that maybe can add more detail. So I don't know. Anyway, I think it'd be an interesting challenge. It'd be like dancing about architecture, right? Okay, yeah. So someone's calling you out. Someone says, "I heard a rumor that Dr. Gay doesn't like math." So you
So
live
you don't
math.
have to like something to understand it. And this is the agreement I make with all of my students when I teach physics. There are certain aspects of the class that we can all get together in hating, but we need to be able to do it completely. I
Yeah.
also really don't like doing crossword puzzles. So we all have different things that we don't enjoy. Um, I have the freedom to choose not to do crossword puzzles. I don't have the freedom to not understand calculus, and I've taken calculus all the way through Calc 3. I've utilized it in many, many ways. I even learned it in both Russian and English because apparently, yeah, I'm just twisted that way. So you can hate something and know how to understand it. It's when you can't do it that you're not allowed to hate it.
So, Tim, so you know what? I'm going to give you an easier question then. So, Tim Amata wants to know, was there anything that existed before the singularity? And so I guess what Tim is saying here is, the thought about the Big Bang is that the universe started, within a sort of singularity, and then we had the Big Bang and the expansion of the universe and inflation and all that kind of stuff. So was there anything that was before the singularity? Proceed.
Invalid question.
Invalid question. So I think one of the most interesting recent conversations on this subject is the one by Lawrence Krauss. There's a video presentation that he did called "A Universe from Nothing," and then there was a book that he just released as well, and it's really interesting and covers this question and doesn't necessarily say what came before the Big Bang, but at least sort of provides a really compelling argument, not an argument, but it's sort of an interesting observation that essentially if you add up all of the matter and all of the light and all of the particles, and then you subtract the gravity and you've got the antimatter, that the actual sum of the universe is zero. When you add on, take away all the things, you do like double entry bookkeeping, right? And you add up all the stuff from the universe and all the stuff, take it away, you end up with zero, which is really fascinating because if it wasn't zero, it would make the universe a lot more complicated. But the fact that it is zero is quite interesting. So, highly recommend you watch that video and read his book as well. Lawrence Krauss is a neat guy. Did he get a shush from you? No.
No, that was Neil deGrasse
Neil
Tyson.
deGrasse Tyson. Wasn't he on that panel? He was on the
Yeah,
SOT
it
panel.
was Lawrence Krauss, myself, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Bill Nye. And
I think
then
he
poor
deserved a
Phil,
shush from
he
you.
did.
Yeah. It was just deGrasse Tyson got caught in the at the moment when you're being talked over.
I had a valid point, and he had a snarky joke, and I wanted to say something scientific, and I did.
It was the shush heard round the world. Again, if you're feeling like doing some, maybe some people can post some of these things that I'm talking about into the YouTube because I can't both talk and dig up YouTube sources. But the universe.
Actually, so my Wikipedia page is so massively out of date, it's not even funny. So if someone out there can add some of this stuff to my Wikipedia page, it would be
Yeah.
glorious.
And your fantastic presentation at the last TAM. And I was completely surprised that you were interviewed on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe this week. I don't know if you remember. They interviewed you at TAM, and it
Yeah.
was a fantastic interview with you about sort of making the world a better place and dealing with trolls, and it was wonderful. So if anyone has missed that, go back and get their hands on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, which on its own is one of the best podcasts out there. I would
And
say
my
it's maybe the
interview is
second best science podcast.
my interview is well into it because I know I started listening to the episode and never got as far as my interview because I ran out of time. So be prepared to sit for a while or use the fast forward button, which I don't use.
Yeah. Okay, so Mark Brown wants to know, how would Newton's telescope compare to today's consumer telescopes?
They're designed using Newton's design.
But how big a telescope did he have? And
Oh, that's I want to say that he basically had a less well coded version of like your standard 4-inch telescope, and then over time got bigger and bigger and bigger.
hold on.
So what he was using was completely equivalent to the stuff that we use as university professors and backyard astronomers
There you
use for
go.
teaching as a university professor.
Um,
We're just better with the materials nowadays.
So Brian Jimenez asks, how can we understand singularities if nature does not create points? So I don't know if that makes sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Well, I guess, does nature create points? Or is everything a three-dimensional object in nature? And so can we have a singularity? But I think the idea of a singularity is not necessarily that it is a point. It is
Right.
just a location where something is
It's where the
approaching a
universe
point.
divided by zero or
Right,
divided by infinity. Pick one.
right. But you can imagine something getting smaller, and you just say it is getting smaller at an accelerating rate as fast as it can, and is getting as small as it can. It will never be zero size, but it's just going to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
And due to the wave particle duality of everything, um, this becomes something very hard to discuss because are you talking about it when the wave function has collapsed, or are you talking about it as that wave particle duality? So it starts to become a we need more words in order to answer your question.
Ilya Sarah asks, what was that particle that was measured moving faster than light? Can't remember. Has this affected some views of physics?
It's not so much that things move faster than the speed of light as quantum tunneling allows a variety of different particles to jump from point A to point B. And what the way this happens is their wave function goes from being primarily located over here to oozing over, for lack of a better way to explain it without mathematics, oozing over a potential barrier and collapsing on the other side of the potential barrier.
Right. I mean, a way to describe that is the fact that, you take an electron and it is most probably right here, but it's also potentially anywhere in the entire universe, that its probability function spreads across the entire universe. But also I think the idea was the neutrinos. I think what the person is mentioning is the neutrinos that were detected moving faster than the speed of
Oh,
light.
that was a faulty cable.
And that was a mistake. It was a bad GPS unit.
Yeah,
So
they just didn't plug their cable in all the way, and it was introducing a timing error.
yeah, so it was a mistake, and fortunately, the laws of physics were not destroyed that day.
Yeah.
There's a good argument going on in the comments about whether we could do a calculus episode or not. So interesting. Um, uh, yeah. Okay. So about the importance and how we use it, and that would be
And
possible.
and for those who are saying that it's my hatred is causing me to not be able to do it or anything like that, I completed Calculus 1 as a junior in high school. So it's really simply a matter of I take no pleasure in math for the sake of math. I like doing physics and astronomy where physical reality is tangled in with the numbers and letters.
That's cool. I'm trying to think when I did calculus in grade 12. I don't know what a junior is. Would that be a senior?
I was 17 years old,
Yeah, so was
and
I.
yeah, I had one more year of high school left.
Oh, I was
So
in my last year of high school.
yeah, and so I took Calc 1, Calc 2, started university in Calc 3.
Um, whew. Well, I think we're kind of running out of questions. So if anyone's got a last question, someone suggested an episode on Newtonian telescopes, which would be kind of interesting, I think.
Could
We've
we
done,
stretch that into 30 minutes?
I don't
Maybe
know.
reflecting telescopes.
Yeah, and then refracting. And so, but I mean, there's some famous telescopes, and they're
And we
set
need
up
to
in
check
different
what we've
ways.
already done.
Yeah. Um, Okay, cool. All right. Well, I think we're good. So everyone's
Okay.
takeaway, your homework, everybody, is to find Pamela's presentation at the Amazing Meeting and be inspired by her, and also to check out this A Universe from Nothing. And it's about an hour long presentation by Lawrence Krauss, and it makes you think. And hopefully, if you've been watching or listening to Astronomy Cast, you should be pretty well equipped to be able to do that. What's next in our train of science stuff this week?
We're
Weekly.
going to have the weekly space hangout, which I believe is you and Emily doing an update on
Oh,
Curiosity on
are we? Are we?
Wednesday.
Oh, that's on. So that's the weekly science hour.
Right. So weekly science hour. Then there's the space hangout Thursday morning, which will
Yep.
be a roundup of the latest news. So I'm assuming there will be discussion on SpaceX failure or
Yes.
not, and
Not. It
hopefully
got to space.
right. But there. So what's interesting is all the people who are saying it's a failure. One of the engines failed, but the sucker worked automatically and compensated. So it's kind of awesome to watch
Mhm.
how stupid people are on the internet.
I see. Okay.
And then of course the Antares launch out of Wallops, which we're all waiting eagerly for, and all that's new in science.
Yep.
Sunday night, weather permitting, will be the virtual star party,
hmm
and I'm going to miss a second one in a row due to travel, but
Hmm.
hopefully this time I won't be trapped in Chicago due to bird strike.
Last night was really great. Actually, we got a chance to see this new comet that people have been taking
Oh,
pictures
cool.
of. Not Comet Ison, but this other one, and I forget the name. It's pretty complicated, but it was good. It was a really good night. I think we're like butter now. It's just going so fast with us, pulling up objects, and we probably went through 25 objects last night. It was really good. It's really smooth. Everyone on the West Coast, unfortunately, so we didn't get anybody from the East Coast.
Oh. And
Yeah,
and if you're interested in being an observer for us, drop us a note.
yeah,
Also talk to Scott Lewis. He's
yeah,
he's our cat herder in chief,
yeah.
and hopefully we'll see you over on the Bout forums hosted by CosmoQuest.
Perfect. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for joining us this week, and thanks for sticking with us and watching this episode live. Save up your killer questions for next week when we talk about the XMM Newton telescope, and we'll see you all around. All right. Well, thanks, Pamela.
Thank you. My pleasure. Bye bye.